because I won it so easily, I thought I could recuperate that same amount. And so I lost so much money in options trading that I don't mind sharing with people because, it's everything is built off of my failures and successes. And so I lost like 15, 16,000 easily within like a 2 week span
Jeez.
that I worked really, really hard for. But luckily, that was just money that I was willing to spend on options trading. I had other money that I never touched at all that has been growing because I never touched it. It
Mhm.
was just put into several ETFs and it grew. And when I finally did the math and I realized, wow, this money that I never touched at all made way more money over time than the money that I tried to actively go up and down, up and down, up and down, and ultimately lost majority of the money.
Welcome back to the Howdy Do That podcast.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks for inviting me and letting me come on for another episode.
Yeah, so last time Vu was on was episode 3, and we really dug into your journey from working in cybersecurity to your pet grooming business. And you were one of the early ones, and so we didn't have video. So now we do have video. So
Yeah,
yeah,
this is a really cool setup. Getting to see how everything is growing. Every time I come here, there's just one new piece of equipment that you can add to your overall setup. But this is awesome.
yeah, trying to make it a full experience. So today, instead of talking about your journey and your career, a big part of the podcast and one of my goals is to help people not only just find work that they love, but helping them do everything in between while they're finding their career path. And a big part of just everyday life is finance and personal finance and how you manage your finances. And so wanted to bring you back as somebody who I always see as a trusted advisor and somebody who I bounce financial ideas off of, just to share some of the things that we've learned together.
Yeah, no, I love talking about this topic. It's something that I'm truly passionate about, something that drives me, and something that we both share interest in.
Yeah. So, um, we're two guys that really love learning about finances, and we really like applying financial ideas and talking about these things. We're not credentialed in any way, and so this isn't financial advice or investing advice, but really just us sharing what we've learned, and hopefully, you'll learn something new, and it'll drive maybe some of your own research to dig into.
Yeah, take it at your own risk.
All right. Well, the financial topic really spans a lot of different areas. Everything from getting out of debt, credit card, wealth management, mindsets. So I was thinking maybe for this conversation, we could start with what kind of mindset you need. Like how do you develop that kind of mindset? Then maybe talk about debt and debt management, because ultimately the goal is to build wealth, build passive income, maybe retire early, get to focus more on what you love. But I think that's maybe the right like route to get there, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. What do you
No,
think?
that's great. I like to add another step at the very end of it, and that's generational wealth. And
Okay.
so I want to eventually get there, but to be able to get there, you have to take 10 steps back. And so
Mhm.
that's what drives all of these little steps that I have, because eventually I want to pass down everything I have to my kids, my children, and future generations.
Nice. Okay, so let's start with mindset. So, what is your financial mindset? Like, how do you think about finances?
So, financial mindset, I try to think about net wealth. I try to think about all of my assets, all of my liabilities, essentially just all the things that you own, all the things that you owe money on, and try to find the differential. Are you in the positive or are you in the negative? And so, if you're in the positive, that's great. If you're in the negative, nothing wrong with that. It just means that you're taking on more risks and you have to be aware about what those risks are at any given point of time. Someone could be taking out a large mortgage, and so they have a lot of risk, but that risk can provide equity, and stability. So everything has to be put into perspective. But overall, you want to be building your wealth by paying down all of your existing debt and then acquiring assets and then continuously building upon those assets so that they grow and not just constantly accumulating all this debt or accumulating assets that just decrease in value.
Yep. Yeah, I think you nailed it. So, it sounds like finances for you is really about building assets, Probably, it sounds like you've been inspired a lot by Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Yeah, I absolutely love that story. I was actually shown it by one of my good friends, Luke Nguyen. He talked about it and he showed me the PDF and I read it. And after that, my mindset just completely shifted on how I looked at anything, not
Mhm,
just finance, not just it just in general life. That everyone is carved this general path that it feels like this is normal to take. If this is so normal, then everyone's doing it. How do we differentiate ourselves from that cog? Like pretend we're just one this big machine with all these individual parts. How do you differentiate yourself outside of it when everyone's just doing what they're told, what they believe is the norm?
mm,
And so we want to break out of this cycle, break out of that rat race, because if it was just so easy, everyone would be doing it.
yeah.
It's
So let's talk more about that. What were your biggest takeaways from that book, and can you describe that norm and what you mean by breaking out of the norm?
To me, the norm for myself was growing up, going to staying in school and getting good grades, going to college, getting a job, working a normal, typical 9 to 5, acquiring a house, having kids, buying, a car every 5 years, doing all the typical things that everyone progressively goes through, spending, 10, 15,000 on a wedding ring, having an extravagant wedding, doing all these things that just seems like the norm.
Mhm,
Um, and then later on, I realized in Rich Dad Poor Dad, the dad that followed all those norms just seemed successful on the face of it, but really on the back end, was he that successful in terms of actual facts, finance, and just wealth?
mhm,
And when I really thought about it, it didn't. It didn't look like that at all. And I started to compare my own life with it and how I felt like I was going down this path of just constantly trying to acquire multiple degrees, trying to get a new car every so often and compared to other people. And I realized that's not it at all. You don't need to have a college degree to be successful. I believe that college is definitely a good driver and most people should go to college. I think college is great.
mhm,
What I'm saying is it's not the only path. A lot of people think that it's the only path, and that's not true at all. There's a
mhm.
lot of different paths in life that you can take, but really it's about your mindset and trying to break out of that norm and not just work for someone else, but to work for yourself.
Yeah. I think there is this narrative in society where, hey, I'm going to get a degree, maybe get a master's degree, get a great job, and continue to progress. And I think more and more I've learned that you can have a great career in certain industries and maybe you find that really fulfilling. And that's, that kind of like 9 to 5 job is what motivates you and you find a lot of fulfillment in that. There's people that love that. And then I think there are a lot of people who do their 9 to 5 but dream of a different lifestyle. And
Yeah.
that for me, my 9 to 5 job, how I think about it is it's an opportunity for me to upskill and learn new skills, but eventually I want to take that and apply it and maybe build my own business, build my own passive income because the incentives in the job market is, you can perform and deliver millions of dollars of value to a company and they may give you a 5% raise, maybe 20% if you're really lucky, but it's only a fraction of, the value that you actually get. And so I think for a lot of it, a lot of folks like the dream is entrepreneurship where you get to eat what you kill and
Yeah.
you're rewarded for like the additional value that you bring. And 9 to 5, the rewards don't always equal the value that you add.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize. I mean, the business is there to make money. You work for them so that you can make money for them. I mean, that's the model right there. They put out the capital, they have the system, they have all of this in place so that they can gain benefit out of you and you're gaining benefit out of them. But at the end, it always tips in favor of the owner, the
Mhm,
stakeholders. And so, as much energy as I was putting into this engineering job, I found that I would only receive back 20%. I would get small bonuses, raises, promotions, but it would never equate to the amount of energy and value and time that I've put in. But whenever I realized that when I own my own business, whatever I put in, I get 100% back.
mhm,
So you get what you put in. And so once I had that mindset change, I was able to realize that, oh, it's better to move towards that. And then once you move away from working for other people and you work for yourself, now you move towards having people work for you.
Mhm.
So just constantly shifting over and then gaining more benefit, because if you just continuously work for other people, you'll always be putting 100% energy and getting 30% value back. It just slowly gets worse and worse over time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And there's upsides to like working for other people, right? If there are big downfalls in the organization, the market's not doing so hot, you still get paid the same. Like
Yeah.
there's stability in that. And I think that's the trade-off is like this steady paycheck versus taking some of the risk on yourself.
It's high risk, high reward. And so it's not for anyone. And that's why you hear that about 50% of new businesses go out of business within 5 years.
Right.
It's true. They take on all this risk because there's all this potential as well. And you don't want to go into it haphazardly thinking, oh, it's so easy. Anyone can do it. If anyone can do it, then why isn't everyone doing it? And
Right.
so you're taking on this major risk because those first couple years you might not be making much at all.
Mhm.
But once you're finally profitable, you can be making a lot of money. And
Yeah.
so you want to break out of that norm right there, and just do something different. I've always thought it was interesting that whenever I was around family members, I would say, hey, I have this friend who is a doctor or an engineer. And immediately they would think, oh, wow, that's a good friend. And I was like, oh, huh, why? And they said, "Oh, they're in a good career." And I was thinking to myself, like, you shouldn't judge someone just off of their title.
Mhm.
That's not it at all. I have other friends who are doing something completely different. If I tell someone that I have a friend who mows lawns, they're thinking, "Oh, they probably don't make much at all." And then they don't realize, "Oh, he actually owns a lawn mowing company and he has 10 people working for him and now he's a multimillionaire."
Yeah.
And so you really shouldn't judge people off of that. We want to have that mindset of, you can do anything
Mhm.
if you put your mind towards doing it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So a lot of what we talked about is like the joys and the benefits of entrepreneurship. I think for a lot of people, even including myself, we're on this journey of like trying to get there. And so for a lot of folks, maybe they're in a place where they're trying to navigate through student loan debt, credit card debt, car loans, mortgages, and just in general, like managing debt and their finances. How did you go about? Did you have any debts that you were working through, and how do you balance prioritizing paying off debts versus, trying to invest in a business versus also investing for like retirement?
Okay, I can start off at a very young age. I did budgeting. And so a lot of people don't truly realize what they have. And so if you don't have a good outlook on what you have, you end up sometimes spending more than what you have. The very basic principle is don't spend what you don't have. So for credit cards, don't go spending more money than you actually have, but just break that out to anything. And so laying out how much do you make on your paycheck, I do a monthly evaluation with incoming expenses. I have this spreadsheet that I update since high school when I had my first job. And so I knew exactly how much money was going in. You put down all of the fixed costs every month, your cell phone, your car payments, anything. Let's say now you have subscriptions to streaming services, or if you play games, gaming services, anything. You map out all these fixed uh, liabilities every single month, and then now you know for sure, okay, you're making out this much money, you're taking away this much money, this is the leftover money. And so at least now you know the wiggle room that you have and continuously grow from it. Once I had that equation locked down and I knew how much I had, I knew how much potential I could have as well, but also be able to outline, oh, I actually have a lot more liabilities than I really thought I did.
Mhm.
I mean, people think, oh, Netflix at the time was like $8, and then this other subscription is only $10. But then you realize that you add up all these different things together. Oh shoot, I was spending like $200 on all these monthly subscriptions. That $200 could have been invested and then grown exponentially and compounded over time. And so really just the first thing you should do is get a good grasp on what your current financial outlook is, because without that, you don't even know where you are. And if you don't even know where you are, how do you know where you want to go? And
Yeah.
so starting out at that, being able to identify all of the money that you have left over wiggle room, now you can actually take that and pay it towards paying off debt. being able to aggressively pay off high interest debt was what really helped me excel in life.
And what would you consider high interest debt?
High interest debt would be credit card debts. There's a lot of any kind of debt that you have when you sign up for different things. Like, let's say you sign up to purchase a bed, like a
Hmm.
bed, and then they have interest free for the first like 2 years. But after that, they give you that benefit because immediately after that two years is over, they will hit you with a very, very high interest rate. Or a lot of sometimes they'll have disclaimers at the bottom and people don't realize they will actually backtrack. If you don't pay the whole thing within those 2 years, they'll actually charge you that full interest rate for the 2 full years.
Oh, wow.
And so a lot of different things have that in the terms that you just don't realize. I like to go about as anything over 5% I consider as high interest.
Okay.
And so anything over 5% was high to me, which a lot of car loans at the time, when you buy a car at a younger age, nowadays it's not as bad, but at a younger age, you're more risky. You don't have as much of a financial portfolio for the credit debtors to be able to evaluate on you on. So they give you a higher interest rate. And so paying off all of that was basically us laying a foundation for me to focus on actually putting my money towards assets by first clearing debt. Student loans, I think, is a really, really good debt to save for most people because it's usually subsidized and very low. The
Hmm.
unsubsidized, though, is usually very high. It's like 6, 7, 8%. That's another high interest debt that I would like to pay off. But anything lower than that, the subsidized is usually pretty low, and it's worth just keeping that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I had some student loans as well, and for undergrad it was subsidized, so it was like 3.5, 4%. So it
Yeah.
wasn't super high. I think for a lot of folks, like I've been asked, should I pay off all my student loans? Should I prioritize investing? I think for some folks, if you believe that the stock market's going to return 6 to 7% a year, maybe it's not you would get more return on your money by investing in like the S&P 500 in the stock market and like an ETF that does return 6 to 7%. But then for some folks that I had talked to, their priority was, hey, like I don't like the feeling and the burden of
Yeah.
like having student loan debt. And for me, it's like there's not really a right answer in this. If you feel like you want to pay off your student loans and that's going to give you joy and that's going to give you the peace of mind that you need, do that. Like prioritize doing that. And you can always invest later as well. Just know that there's a trade off there,
Yeah.
right? And so I think for folks that are thinking about, do I invest? Do I pay off these debts? Yeah, like if you have credit card debt that's 18%, if you have student loan debt that's greater than 5%, do I want a 5% guaranteed return on my dollar
Yeah.
versus a 6 to 7% potential? It's
Mhm.
like that, the scales start to tip there and you're like, maybe it is worth just taking the 5%.
Yeah.
But I think for a lot of these financial decisions, understanding like what's going to give you the most peace of mind and joy as well and like your risk level, there's not really a right answer for everything.
Yeah, I completely agree. I've been presented with the same scenario, and I tell people, well, it's completely based on your own personal emotions, how you want to build a foundation. If you just think about this completely just financially and logically, if you have two choices whether to pay down debt, let's pretend the debt has a 5% interest rate and or put into the S&P 500, historically it's about 6 to 8%. But for this regard, let's pretend that we know for sure it's going to be 8%. So logically, it makes sense to put your money, let's say $1,000 that you got as a gift from your grandparents, to put it into investing because that's 3 more% than paying down your debt. Why would you do this? Well, I try to tell people it's based on what your emotions are and if you can control your finances because the 5% is guaranteed if you pay down your debt. No, you don't have to think anything more of it.
Mm,
With the investing, you make an additional 3%, but you also have to factor in capital gains.
yeah.
Whether if you sell it with earlier than a year, you have short-term capital gains, or you pay it after a year, you have long-term capital gains. But regardless, you still are paying taxes on those gains. And so what you think is a guaranteed 3% may not actually be 3% because you're paying taxes on that 3%. And a lot of people don't even actually take that money and use it to pay off their debt.
Hmm.
So, in theory, it makes perfect sense. Yeah, you're making more money here And if you put that money towards paying off debt, that's awesome. But if you put all your money over here and letting your debt accumulate, now it's actually becoming an issue because what you think you have, oh, you have this money right here because you just made some money. You
Mhm.
made an additional 3% minus the taxes. So now you have more play money, more entertainment money. And so they're using that extra money to spend it on other assets and they're not even thinking about paying down their debt. And so it's a double whammy right there
Yeah.
that they're paying all that and they're not using that money to pay down their debt. And then they think that they have extra money, so they spend it elsewhere. And so now it hurts them even worse.
Yeah. I think a big thing I want to circle back to what you had talked about earlier, which is getting a really good understanding and baseline of your income, expenses, your cash flow. I have two things that I look at each month with Kelly. I have one sheet that has my budget. So I look at my income, Kelly's income, I take out all the taxes, deductions, health insurance, and whatnot. And then I categorize and say, hey, on a monthly basis, I typically spend, however much on insurance and mortgage and gas and whatever else. And that gives me a sense of like where my money typically goes. And that gives me a sense of, okay, I know I can put 10% into investing. I now marry that sheet with personal capital. I think they just got bought out by Empower or something like that.
Yeah.
But rather than manually adding it in, it takes a first pass at it. So there's about 10 to 20% that it gets wrong and I have to recategorize. But then that lets me look at it and say, hey, this month I spent this much money in this category. And I'll bring Kelly in and say, hey, here's how much money we brought in this month. Here's how much we spent. And we'll go through each category and we'll say, hey, was this worth it? Because essentially, the way that we've been trying to frame finances is, we're exchanging time and life energy for money. And so when we spend money, we want to make sure that that spending was worth the time and life energy that it took us to earn that money.
Yeah, I think you hit a really great point right there that a lot of people don't realize. You want to measure a value. I just measure it as general value, but trying to factor in the amount of time it takes for you to make that money, how much happiness it provides, how much time it may save because it could be something that provides convenience. All those things together equals, this potential value right there. Was it worth buying or spending at that time? But, spending a couple $1,000s on this purple bed, on the face of it, looks very expensive. It doesn't seem like it's worth it. But then when I really factor it out and see that this is something that I use every single day for 8 hours, and I really think about all the value, the additional energy, and rest that I'm getting for a good night's sleep that's applied into every single day, that those couple $1,000s is nothing compared to the
Mhm.
value that it provides. And so you want to measure everything out.
So let us know if you'd be interested in a follow-up video on how Vu and I do our budgeting. It sounds like we have similar but maybe different mechanisms. But if you want to walk through how we use it, yeah, let us know and maybe we'll come back and we'll do a screen share, something like looks like.
Yeah, and then we can compare and people can vote whose is better.
I love it. A little
Yeah.
bit of competition there as well.
Something that I would like to add, a new category that I added in the last couple years was I actually map out all of my assets as well on the bottom. And so I'm not talking about like your income and your expenses. I map out, I have this much in my HSA account. I have this much in my Roth IRA account. I have this much in my traditional IRA account. This is my 401k. This is my crypto account. I have my Venmo cryptocurrency, my PayPal cryptocurrency, my Webull. I have all these different things. So I actually know how much I have in assets every single month, just the first of every month.
Yeah.
And you could see that it's either growing or shrinking. And if you ever see it shrinking, you'll notice like, oh, why did it shrink? Did I make a big purchase? Because in theory, that number should always be growing. It
Yeah.
doesn't have to grow fast, but it should be growing every single month.
Yeah, I'm totally gonna win this competition because I have that automated through the Empower app. I'm not doing it the manual, old school way.
I like to manually do it because then I like to look it up and then I go into each of those sites, and so it's an exercise for me.
Yeah,
But if you can do it like automatically, that's awesome. That makes
yeah,
it a lot easier for everyone else.
yeah. Okay, so let's move from budgeting and tracking money to investing. So we've talked a little bit about, saving versus investing. Let's say for those that want to start investing, there's a lot of different ways that you can invest. There are people that are out there saying, "Hey, pay me 2% or 1%. I'll invest your money for you. You don't have to worry about it." Then there's a lot of confusion about, do I use Robinhood? Do I use a Webull? Do I use a Vanguard? How do you approach investing, and what would you recommend for folks?
Okay. It really depends on how active you want to be with your investing. If you want to be super, super active, then you can get on any kind of trading platform and do prior research. Let's say like a Webull or a Robinhood or even like Charles Schwab. You can use any of the major financial institutions, anyways, and you could do active trading there. The more trades you do, the more it may potentially cost for each of these trades. But there's a lot of platforms like Robinhood that lets you do it for free, but there are trade-offs with it. But it comes down to, are you going to actively research all of this? I used to spend a lot of money researching all these different companies, and everyone should do this anyways because we should learn more about the companies that we're investing in. But then I realized, and I started to measure, how much time is it taking me? It's taking me these hours and hours and hours every week. And am I gaining hours and hours and hours worth of value and increase in my investment? And ultimately, I thought of it and I came to the answer that no, I did not. I was spending all this time researching on these companies, but I wasn't getting the value back. And so that's why I think a lot of people don't like to do the research themselves, because at the end, it's very difficult to beat the market. There's a lot of people who literally dedicate their lives. This is their career. They're analysts that's working at these financial institutions, and they're trading left and right, day in and day out. And here I am, just an average Joe, just doing research on Google. Do I think that I could beat out most of them? I may get lucky here and there, but overall, I don't think that the average person can beat the market.
Yeah.
And so if you want to be active, that's awesome. If you want to be semi-active, there's a lot of platforms that allow you to just trade a little bit here and there, but you can just put most of your money in the S&P 500 and just call it good. And overall, the returns are pretty decent because time is on your side. You just
Yeah.
let things compound. Or you can just take a completely hands-off approach and you can just let someone else manage your money for you. You could go to institutions like Edward Jones, and you pay this financial advisor, and everyone charges a different rate because depends on how active they are. They'll
Mhm.
rebalance your portfolio every 3 months, every half a year, every year. It doesn't matter. It just depends on how often they rebalance that they charge this fee. But if you want a completely hands-off approach, you just give your money to them, and now they will just take a percentage to pay and compensate for their time. So it comes down to how active do you want to be? Do you want to be very, very active, semi-active, or hands-off, not at all? And for the average person, I would say it's better to be in the middle. Just put your money in the S&P 500 and learn a little bit more about like some companies as well. You want to still learn some of it, because if you just do nothing at all and you completely trust the financial advisor, what if they're doing something that's completely off, but you have no idea because you didn't learn it at all?
Yeah. Yeah, a couple of thoughts there. So there's this concept of like the efficient market hypothesis, which is where every like information that's out there is already priced into the stock price. Like it's an efficient market. So as soon as the new knowledge is released, it gets priced into that stock price. And so unless you're at the cutting edge and like really researching, it's really, really hard to beat the market. Um, and there's other like financial research on like if you get a portfolio of like 30 stocks or more, you're pretty diversified at that point, and so the S&P 500 is a really good basket. And I think a lot of folks ask about, international, do I invest there or do I just do domestic? I think most of the S&P 500, like I think a third of it is like funded internationally. Like a lot of
Yeah.
that income comes from like, Apple, Microsoft, like they have international business as well. And so you're getting some international exposure there as well. From a fees perspective, I guess the way that I think about it is a 1% fee over 30, 40 years can be hundreds of thousands of dollars. If you're taking 1% out, that's 1% that's not snowballing and you're not getting the compounds over years. And so, yeah, I think some financial advisors are good. 1 to 2% can be a lot.
Yeah.
And so I think what I've read and what I've seen is that like if you really want to be hands off, just find an account, open an account either in a Roth if you qualify for that. There's certain like income requirements. You can open different IRAs as well if you want to invest. and just pick a target retirement fund. Like, let's say
Yeah.
you want to retire in 20, 30 years, their target retirement dates, those have less than 1% fees, and you'll get a similar thing. They auto rebalance too. I would say if you want to be more hands on and you want to lower your fees even further, then you can build your own portfolio with a mix of like bonds and different ETFs, like, I don't know, Vanguard Total Stock Market or the international ones. And then if you want to be more active, then you can do that plus buy your favorite stocks. But I'm really big on trying to figure out how to reduce those fees. And I think we're really lucky that we live in a time where Vanguard is around, where people like Jack Bogle created low cost index funds, because that used to not be a thing. Like, it used to be you had to go to all these investors, and they make finances sound so challenging. But if you really look into it, if you just build a diversified portfolio, which isn't really that hard anymore, since you can just pick one or two ETFs and then automate and just keep buying it month to month, we're at a time where like it's really easy for folks to invest. And I think what makes it hard is that people don't want to get rich slow. They want to get rich fast. And
Yeah.
investing is a long-term game. But once you understand like some of these financial principles of like investing and diversifying and just letting it compound and not being emotional and like selling when it's low, but investing consistently, then wealth creation is a little more straightforward than I think the industry likes to make it feel.
Yeah, investing is not glamorous. Investing successfully is a very boring and slow process that a lot of people just don't have the patience for. They want to jump into that options trading and get rich fast. If they were getting rich fast, why isn't that more people are just striking all these lotteries and you're hearing all of these awesome stories? You don't hear about the higher number of people who are losing because they risked it all on these bets. And
Hmm.
so I don't recommend anyone do options trading unless they're very, very well versed with what it is, because it's just such a risky avenue to go. I did my own options trading and I lost thousands and thousands of dollars
Hmm.
because I won it so easily. I thought I could recuperate that same amount. And so I lost so much money in options trading that I don't mind sharing with people because, it's everything is built off of my failures and successes. And so I lost like 15, 16,000 easily within like a 2 week span
Jeez.
that I worked really, really hard for. But luckily, that was just money that I was willing to spend on options trading. I had other money that I never touched at all that has been growing because I never touched it. It
Hmm.
was just put into several ETFs and it grew. And when I finally did the math and I realized, wow, this money that I never touched at all made way more money over time than the money that I tried to actively go up and down, up and down, up and down, and ultimately lost majority of the money.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, I highly recommend everyone to just put their money into any kind of overall like a ETF, or there's even like Vanguard portfolios now that have no expense ratio.
Oh,
Like
wow.
it's a lot newer. I don't hear much about it. Um, so I'm still doing a little bit of research into it myself, but there's expense ratios that are really, really low or zero, which I thought was really interesting because you negate that con right there of that expense being charged from your account every so often. So
Mhm.
your money is growing faster at a certain rate. And Vanguard did this because they were trying to catch up with all these other platforms that allow you to do free trading.
Yeah. I love Vanguard. That's who I have my Roth IRA through. And I used to manually go in and like rebalance it and stuff. But one of the things that Vanguard has is digital advisor, and it's like robo advising. There are some other apps like Wealthfront and Betterment that also will rebalance your portfolio based on your risk tolerance that you can use. But Vanguard has their own thing. And since I was already buying these Vanguard ETFs, they cap your expense ratio if you invest with them. They'll invest it into their own ETFs. And so it really reduces the fee. And now I just put money in. I just
Yeah.
put money in each month. I've already filled out their little survey on like my risk tolerance, and it automatically rebalances each year and says, "Hey, stocks are way up and you want to be invested 80% in stocks, and now because stocks are up, you're at 90%." So it sells off a certain amount of the stocks and rebalances back down to bonds. So I'm at my, desired risk tolerance ratio, cuz
Yeah.
ideally as you age, right, you take on less risk, like you ease off the stocks and you shift more to,
Bonds.
yeah, bonds, whatever it is, for more wealth preservation rather than wealth generation.
Yeah, there's always that mix. And so it's exactly those three that you're talking about whenever people can build their own portfolio. And it's really not hard at all. You don't have to go to an advisor if you don't want to. You can just build your own, but it's always the same three. And so you want to shift them out depending on your current aspect in life. If you are more risk averse, if you're getting older, you're about to have kids. And so you need this money more available and you're not as high risk tolerant at
Mhm.
that time, then maybe you want to shift more away from stocks and more towards bonds. But you always want to shift your money exactly where your life is. And so you don't want to always put it in only stocks.
Yeah, yeah, no, that makes sense. I think a rule of thumb I heard was like you take 110 and you minus your age. So let's say we're like 30 now, and so 110 minus 30 is about 80%, right? 80% of your investments would still be in something of growth, right? Like stocks or whatever it might be. Let's say you're 50 or 60, right? Then you would be at 50% or whatever it might be, or maybe even less, so that you're taking on less risk. But that's like a general rule of thumb that I've heard thrown around as well.
Yeah, I've definitely heard of that. And so it's a really good way for people to measure because they don't know how much of a mix that they should. But
Mhm.
really, it just depends on where you are. And so we can afford to be more risky at a younger age because time is on our side. A lot of people just you really need to get over the get rich quick aspect and then just let time work itself.
Yeah.
Over time, when you just zoom out and look at the timeline, they'll all eventually go up. There will be dips and there will be peaks. It will go up and down. The market has always done this ever since the beginning. And so you just want to let time work itself out because if you just dump your money in and let it, don't even try to time the market. Don't try to
Mhm.
save all your money in the savings and then buy it at when you think is a dip. Just let your money deduct however much every month and automatically put it towards these different buckets that you've allocated to, whether it's stocks, bonds, or others, and then you just let it grow. And then,
Mhm.
so then now you take away all emotions. You're not trying to time the market anymore. And you're also compensating for these dips and these growths because it's allocating it out and averaging it out. So it doesn't even matter anymore because you're just putting it in at all different intervals
Yep.
and it takes the least amount of time. You don't have to research into it. And now you can just have a stress-free way of investing.
Yeah. Dollar cost averaging. I think it's one of the best ways to do it. You sometimes you buy high and sometimes you buy low, but no matter what, you're guaranteed the most average cost.
The biggest thing that I was able to take away when I switched to that model was I had a happier life.
Mhm.
When you are investing a lot of money in options and stocks that are high risk, you get anxious, you have a lot of stress sleeping at night. And so it was just very stressful time for me back then when me and a group of friends, we would invest and we had no idea how the next week would be. It would be very exciting and it would be very stressful. It would just be a roller coaster ride of emotion because the market was just all over the place. We compared it to gambling at a casino
Yeah.
during the pandemic because you had no idea where the market was going and people fed off of that. It was exciting because it moved so much. And so you could win $6,000 easily within a couple hours, but just as easily you could lose $10,000 within 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So people wanted to build off of those quick wins and just win because they saw that there were people posting on the famous, Reddit and people were posting all their wins that they got rich. They were instant millionaires and everyone tried to mimic that lifestyle right there, that those same moves to make that. But at the end of the day, no one saw for that one winner, there was 10 losers.
Yeah.
And so you don't wanna be one of those 10 losers. Just do it the slower way, which is much more guaranteed, and just have a stress-free life because it's not worth it at all.
Yeah. I think you hit on it earlier. Like investing shouldn't be this like big high. Like it should be very boring. You should set it and then forget about it and like let
Yeah.
it do a thing and let compound interest take effect. But I guess for those that are, let's say they're saving for something, saving for a house or saving for a vacation or whatever it might be. And so they've got an emergency fund and they're setting this cash aside rather than letting it sit in a checking account. this money is losing its value every day because of inflation, and
Yeah.
what are some ways that you can hedge against that? Or like, where do you put, cash that you might need in the short term?
Okay. There's two options that I like. The first option is putting money towards a Roth IRA. And so you take your money and you put it in a Roth IRA, and a Roth IRA is for retirement, is what it's built for. But a lot of people don't realize it could be a good emergency savings fund. For most people, they can contribute the full 6,000. You can put it into a Roth IRA and you let that money grow tax free. And so that $6,000 you put in there and it can grow up to like $8,000, $9,000. You just let it grow over time. It's still an investment account. So you can put it in there, put it in ETFs, put it into certain stocks, but try to keep it risk averse. Try to keep it because you're viewing this as a savings account. And as that money is growing, it'll just continuously grow and you won't be taxed on that amount that it grew on. And what people don't realize is if I put $6,000 in that savings account, in the future, I can pull that original $6,000 out of the account tax free, deduction free. So all of that money that you originally put in, you can pull out. You just can't pull out the interest that grew because that is money that could be capitalized if you pulled it out too early.
Mhm.
But at least you can pull out the original investment. And if you put it in a savings fund at your bank, it's usually going to be the same amount anyways. So you
Right.
want to maximize that benefit every single year by putting the max amount into your Roth IRA if you can afford to. The second way that I recommend most people is actually what I wanted you to talk about that you recently introduced me to, that there's savings account that actually has really high interest rates rather than the traditional big banks that you would go to like Chase or Wells Fargo.
I like to view my Roth IRA as an emergency fund. So for me, it's like an investment account, but also like I know that like if I ever get really stuck, I can pull money out of my Roth IRA. But generally, I want to leave my Roth alone and let it grow. And so if I have a short-term cash need, or if I'm just like saving money for an emergency or a rainy day, I like to move money away out of my checking account so I don't see it, so then I don't spend it. I used to use Amex Personal Savings, and they've got really competitive rates. I just moved it to Wealthfront, which has like a 4.05% offer. They have like a bonus that's like 4.5%. And so that's when I sent it to you, Vu, to share because 4% is significant. It doesn't quite keep you up with inflation, but you take on zero risk, right? Like I'm not
Yeah.
investing it. I'm always going to get 4% or wherever that rate is. They adjust it, up and down based on whatever interest rates that they're getting. But generally, right now, you should be able to get around 3.5, 4% for a high yield savings account with zero effort. And you just transfer your money in. And so when you're looking at these high yield savings account, I like to look for are the FDIC insured, which means that like if they go bankrupt, the government will cover and I'll get my money back. So it puts security into these banks that you can trust. Are there minimums? So some people require a direct deposit each month. They say, hey, there's a fee if you don't have a direct deposit each month. So you want to make sure you're looking at that. And there are some that limit how often you can withdraw. Typically, what these banks are doing is you put money in, they take your money, they're loaning it out to other people, gaining, 8% interest or whatever. Or they're taking your money and they're investing it themselves and they're making money off of that. And so they're trying to incentivize you to let them hold on to your cash for you. But I definitely think that if you have a significant amount of cash that you're not using or you're not investing, then park it somewhere where it's gonna, not lose value to inflation as readily. I'm a big fan of those, and there's a lot of options out there, but yeah, the Wealthfront is where I have it right now.
Yeah, I think a combination of those two would be the perfect solution for most people out there. The Roth IRA is my emergency fund, but it's not money that you should be putting in and out, and then shifting money
Mhm.
all the time. It's money that you just put towards there once or twice a year. And so that's why I didn't talk about the second option until you mentioned it, because that's the one that you should be actively using. You should be using this savings account all the time, just moving money in and out because that's where you'll have your money more easily accessible. Roth IRA, it is accessible, but it's not meant to be a place that you pulled out all the time. You're supposed to only put it in a certain amount, and then if you ever pull it out, you're done. Like you can't just oh, I can recontribute the 6,000 for that year. No, you're done. You once you hit the cap, you're done. And so that high yield savings account is a really good place to park your money as you're shifting assets around, if you're paying off bills or doing anything at all, you shouldn't have a bunch of money sitting in your checking account anyways, because that's high risk for different things like fraud.
Mhm.
And if someone accidentally was able to get into your access to your account, it's a lot easier for them to get to the money in your checking account than it is your savings account.
Yeah.
And so having it somewhere else is much more safe than having it as where your money is stored. And another thing that I like to tell people is it's actually nice to have your savings at a different bank than where you originally bank, where you're checking. And the reason why is because it makes it very inconvenient for you to wait for your money to shift back and forth every single time you transfer. And so you really have to think about your money when you're spending it. So if I want to make a impulse buy right here, I saw this nice TV that's like 2 grand. I really want to buy it. Oh shoot, I don't have money in my checking. I need to pull it from savings. This gives you the time to really evaluate, do you need that TV? Do you need that thing or not? Because it's going to take you time to shift money from your savings into your checking and then your checking back.
Yep.
It's just
No.
that additional layer.
Yeah, no, that's a great point of like one, just designing this to where you are protecting yourself against your sort of like primitive instinct and
Yeah.
operating at a higher level. But I also think from a safety perspective, Kelly and I don't carry our debit card around. Like
Yeah.
we leave it at home. We have it on our Apple Pay. So if we ever need to like access a Chase Bank or something like that, we just tap our phones. It's secure. Apple Pay doesn't store your credit card information. And so it's all encrypted, which is really nice. But for banks, what we typically do is we just carry our credit cards around. And that way, it's a lot easier to lose your debit card and for somebody to liquidate your money.
Yeah.
And because it's your money and not the banks don't really care as much. But with credit cards, you're borrowing the bank's money and then you're going to pay it off. So if we were to lose our credit card, it's a lot easier to cancel your credit card, say that, your credit card information got stolen and for them to take care of it rather than carrying your debit card around. And so I often advise people, hey, like if you can, like carry a little bit of cash if you need it, but generally like your credit card and Apple Pay with your debit card is going to be another layer of protection as well.
Yeah, we actually cut up our debit cards. We don't even have debit cards
Oh,
anymore
nice.
because I think that they're just too risky. There's no benefits from it unless people have a problem with spending. If they end up spending more than they actually have, then that's a good idea to have a debit card. But really, any instance other than that, like you really shouldn't have a debit card at all because there's no protection. That
Hmm.
money goes out if you lose your credit card on the street and someone uses it and they can often use it without the PIN nowadays.
Hmm.
They're just taking that money and there's no protection at all. The bank will not help you because that money was taken directly from your account versus a credit card. You can now file it and they'll start investigating it. There's fraud charges that they usually can reclaim for you. And so you don't have to worry as much. But with a debit card, you're just out of luck.
Yeah.
And another thing that I like to tell people is always activate multi-factor authentication, MFA, or I like to call it 2FA. And the reason why there's a difference between MFA and 2FA, 2FA means the same thing as multi-factor authentication, but it's out of bound. And so that what that means is it's a separate mode of authentication than whatever it is you're verifying. For example, let's say I'm doing a computer and I'm checking for email or going into a website right now, and then now it's going to ask for authentication. MFA to my email is still the same mode right here because it's
Mhm.
still on the laptop. You want 2FA, which means out of band, meaning it's separate from that. And so separate from that could be your cell phone or something else, let's say a YubiKey, like a physical USB key that you insert in. So something that is completely separate that if someone compromised, let's say they compromise my laptop, they can't just use the same device to be able to
I
authenticate on
see.
that same device, like let's say biometrics.
Mhm.
Yeah, the biometrics is right there. It's still connected to the laptop, but it's still on the same device. And so you want something completely out of band that they would need to steal multiple things to be able to get to your identity, which is very difficult to do.
Well, that's interesting. I didn't know there was a difference. I always thought people just called it different things just because, but that's good to know that there
Yeah.
is a difference between 2FA and MFA.
2FA and MFA. Yeah,
Yeah.
so MFA is just if it's the same asset, but 2FA is still MFA. It's still multi-factor
Mhm.
authentication, but it's out of band.
What other things do you do to protect yourself financially online?
One of the things that I like to tell people is to freeze their credit on the three credit bureaus. a lot of people they hear about all these advertisements about credit monitoring. Hey, I can sign up for like $5 a month where they do identity lock, or they call it many different things, but essentially it's credit monitoring where they will monitor your three credit bureaus on activity that might be unauthorized, whether it's opening up a fraud bank account so they could pull a bunch of money from your credit line and then keep it for themselves. And that's what identity thieves are going after. They're trying to go after your identity so that they could take money away from you or potential money away from you. That's what they're doing all of these different things like social engineering and phishing for, to get your identity. Well, a lot of people don't realize that there's this thing that is actually absolutely free that you could do by just freezing your credit. You can contact each of the three credit bureaus, and we could provide links for people if they're interested. That you can go to these links to Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion, and they will let you create your profile. You'll link in, and you can freeze your credit, and you can make it so that you can temporarily unfreeze it, or they say thaw whenever you need to. Let's say apply for a car loan, or let's say you want to apply for getting a mortgage on a house. You can unfreeze it for a set period of time, and then it will automatically refreeze. Anytime your credit is frozen, no one can pull it. They
Mm.
can't do a soft pull, they can't do a hard pull, they can't do any of that. And so even there's many times where I froze my credit, and then I went to apply for something. I didn't even realize that that needed to pull my credit at all. And they contacted me. I was like, "Hey, your credit's frozen. So can you unfreeze it so that we could do this action?" And then I realized, "Oh shoot, I froze it. I forgot. That's good." But it's doing exactly what it's supposed to. It's frozen so that now no one can pull my credit at all. And if they can't pull your credit, they can't steal your identity.
Yep. I think so we've talked about this a couple times, and I think Vu had told me this a year ago, and I was like, "Oh, that's so overkill. I'm not gonna do it. It's so much work. You gotta make accounts." And I thought it was gonna be a ton of work to do, and we had chatted about it again. I was like, "I should really do this because there's a lot of scams going on right now." I think people are just getting more creative, and the basic training that you're getting on phishing and stuff, those need to be updated because like it's evolving so quickly. And so I think freezing your credit's a really great safety measure to take. I thought it would take like an hour to do. It took me 15 to 20 minutes for me to do Kelly and ours across all three credit bureaus. I thought it'd be this like really taxing, slow, old school UI, but the UI is actually pretty modern. So you build your account, you answer the security questions to verify that it's you, and you can freeze your credits. And then I thought to unfreeze it, it'd be really annoying to do too. But anytime you do need to do it, you log back into your account and you just click a button. It's like a little like toggle, like
Yeah.
freeze and unfreeze. I just had this perception that it was going to take so long, but I think it's such a great security measure. So I think for those, if you had to take one thing away from it, like that's probably the one thing that I'd be like, that's probably one of the best ways to protect yourselves. And it doesn't take as long as you think it would take, is my encouragement. And so if you have time, definitely do it because it does give me a better sense of security that, if we do mess up or we fall for one of these phishing things, that the damage is really limited, that you really
Yeah.
limit the downside. But if you don't do these things, there's a lot of downside that could happen. People could open up new credit cards. It's a big issue, and you may not find out for a year or two. And it's a much, much bigger headache. So thanks for encouraging me to do that multiple times. And I'm really glad that I did it because I learned just like how simple it is and how, it's a lot easier than I thought it would be.
Yeah, and it's absolutely free, and that's what really bothered me back then. I was like, "Why wasn't I doing this sooner?"
Mhm.
I thought it was exactly the same way as you were when I'd have to go in, submit a form, go through all these things because a lot of these institutions have really, really old school stuff, and so it might be really tedious to do. But I think they updated everything and they realized the new generation isn't gonna understand all these different forms, and they made it so easy that you can just lock it and then now just have literally a button, a toggle just to
Mhm.
turn it on and off. Heck, I can even do it on my iPhone now, and just there's an app, and
Yeah.
so you have to verify your identity still, but then I can just unfreeze it through that app, and that's all it takes. And so I highly suggest everyone to freeze all three of your credit bureaus because thieves cannot take anything from it when it's frozen.
Yeah, there's really no point in doing wealth creation if you can't protect the wealth that you actually create. And
Yeah.
so, really, really important security stuff that we'd both encourage you to do. But we've talked about a lot of stuff. I think we should probably go for another hour. I thought we would cover a lot more topics, but we don't want to bore you all too much. And so, Maybe we'll end on what other advice would you have for folks as they're building their financial journey, and what's it like one important thing that you think a lot of people should maybe focus on or don't think enough about?
Yeah, it's just crazy to think that, time has went by so fast because we could talk about this for hours and hours, and everyone doesn't realize that this is literally the same conversation that me and John have every day. We talk about this stuff all the time, and other people say that it's boring, but it's interesting. It's fun for us. And so, because it's fun, it doesn't feel like a chore.
Yeah.
But what I'd like to share with everyone is a quote that I learned pretty early on that someone said to me that really resonated with me. And they said, show me the five friends who are you're closest to, and I can tell you the kind of person that you are. And it really stuck with me because it really showed like, the people that you surround yourself with matter so much. That is your support system. That is your foundation right there. And so if you surround yourself with people who are not motivated, those who don't have drive, those who may potentially put you down, those who are maybe toxic and not really supportive of the things you're doing, they will drag you down because everything averages out. And so if you support yourself with people who are very encouraging, nourishing, they support all of the ventures that you do and actually push you to be a better person while you're pushing them as well, you will inadvertently become a better person because of your group. And so you want to build this network, this foundation that you can just slowly build off of because everyone helps each other. We all grow together.
I think a big part of the community aspect is not only like, is there a character piece of it and like people who can encourage you from a community perspective, but I think another part of it's like your spending habits are also driven by the people that you hang out with. And so you want to surround yourself with people that, are thoughtful about their finances as well and that are aligned in that mentality so that you guys can support each other and encourage each other because it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. Having folks that are like-minded is just really helpful along the journey as well.
As you grow, your friends will grow with you, and you also have different values as you're growing as well. The 5 friends that I had, 10 years ago are not the same 5 friends that I would say today.
Mhm.
You yourself is also growing, and so that circle that may also change as well. But that's part of life that
Yeah.
your values change, and a lot of people don't. They look, and I would be able to say like, hey. John is one of my closest friends today, but they don't realize that we've only became this close recently, but people would think that, "Oh, we've been friends for, like, a decade now."
Yeah. Yeah. It's so funny because a lot of friends in Austin I've known for a little longer, maybe a couple months, and they're like, "Oh, you haven't known Vu since college?" And I'm like, "No, we just started hanging out like a year and a half ago." And they're like, "What?"
Yeah.
And so,
We've
yeah.
known of each other because we met each other through church back in Oklahoma,
Mhm.
but just knowing of each other, we never really talked.
So yeah, friendships grow and they change, and well, I'm thankful for your friendship and for coming to share your knowledge. Last time on episode 3, if you haven't listened to it, you should definitely give it a listen because Vo shares his like actual journey and things, and a lot of the podcast has been about people's career path and their journey. But I'm also really passionate about finances. I have a lot of friends that are passionate about personal finance as well, and so if you enjoyed this episode, give us a like or a subscribe. And if you want to hear more of it with Vu or with others, let us know and we can share some more as well. But thank you so much again, Vu, for joining.
Yeah, this is really fun. Alright, till
All right,
next time.
everyone. Until next time. Bye, y'all.